Welcome, welcome, welcome. How's everybody feeling?
Doing well, doing well. Happy hump day.
Oh, yeah. I don't think I'm allowed to say that anymore, though. We have HR now.
True. Well, happy midweek checkpoint.
Well, hey, welcome everybody. I am super pumped to be here with Jesse this afternoon. I almost said morning. It's been one of those kinds of days. Um, we are going to talk about some security stuff. Um, and I know what you're thinking. Oh, cool. You guys are going to sell us Timus. We'll talk about Timus, but the real goal of today's webinar is to help you, the MSP, talk about security with your clients. Because let's be honest, I'm sure at least once you've had the conversation with a client where they just look like a deer in headlights, or they look like just confused. They're not getting it. So, uh, answer me in the chat. Have you had that situation? Do your clients get confused when you try to pitch cybersecurity to them? That's what I'd love to see in the chat. Um, that is that is the question. Jesse, what are you seeing when you talk to do when you talk to MSP partners? Um, what are you hearing?
Yeah. Well, thank you, of course, for the honor of the invitation. Some of you in attendance may know me. I'm the head of partnerships at Timus Networks, and among some of the other things that I do, I provide direct sales and marketing overlay for our partners. We only work with MSPs. That's just sort of how we've built a solution from the ground up and the exact market demographic that we're serving. But on the topic of like, how do we like, what challenges do I typically see MSPs facing when positioning security services? And I mean, I'm particularly looking at this through the lens of, let's say Timus SASE, zero trust network access, network security. One of the biggest challenges, and I see somebody already mentioning this in the chat, which is totally
Mhm.
true. Like, it's tough to pitch like what's the actual return on investment with security services. Because obviously, security services, I mean, of course, to an audience like this should be quite apparent, but just to air it out in sort of a collaborative form like this, one of the obvious challenges is that security services don't really have that high of a perceptive like added value, right? You're essentially purchasing insurance in a lot of ways, right? You're kind of preparing for something that you are expecting and hoping not to happen, right? You're trying to prevent it. And I think when it comes to positioning security services, and really positioning what the return on investment is. Obviously, you want to understand maybe using publicly available data, for example, reports from cyber insurance firms, research from different vendors, market research firms. What's actually the cost of inaction? In the event
Mhm.
that you have a security incident, God forbid, I mean, what are the actual projected costs of experiencing ransomware, for example? Obviously, those costs are astronomical and, relatively speaking, a drop in the bucket when you're comparing them to what the monthly cost is, buying a certain security service from your MSP. So I think leveraging publicly available data to just show what the actual cost incurred would be in the event of having an incident and how your security service would actually help to prevent it uh, is very, very important. And I see another comment from Sean. Thinking that AV is all you need and really all they know. Yeah, this is also a significant challenge. Like, you have to. I'm sure a lot of people here go on the Reddit/r/MSP forum, and if you're in there, if you frequent it even to a small degree, you'll see probably a post go up once or twice a month that says, what's your biggest challenge as an MSP? And almost invariably, you'll see the top one or two comments saying something like end users. And end users are the biggest challenge because, among other things, they don't really understand, the ins and outs of IT infrastructure and the importance of security, particularly when you're thinking about a pretty contemporary security approach being the layered approach, right? Defense in layers. Obviously, AV is an inextricable part of any contemporary security stack. Like, of course, right? If you started an MSP today and you went into let's say a peer group boardroom and you told everybody what your stack was, but you omitted, mentioning AV, well, people will probably laugh you out of the room. Obviously, that's sort of a foundational part of a standard kit. But when you're thinking about defense and layers, like we're defending against all different types of attack vectors and making sure all parts of our attack surface across our digital estate are plugged up. So AV, of course, is very foundational. But when you're thinking about things like network security, like how are we controlling people's access in the network? How are we
Yeah.
understanding what's happening from a process standpoint on local devices that people are using? Managed company devices. So again, I think the power is really going to be the power of security and the value is well illustrated by using publicly available data. Like for example, like Coalition and Beasley, two of the biggest cyber insurers in the world, they released a couple of reports last year, independent of each other. By the way, this is on the topic of zero trust network access.
Hmm.
They independently found in 2025 that around 40 to 45% of all ransomware attacks that they had observed occurred through compromised VPNs using stolen credentials. And I think this is a very powerful data point because this isn't like some MSP or even vendor driven narrative that you might be trying to spin, biases
Yeah.
included. This is coming from, let's say unbiased third parties just doing research to ensure that people have a trove of data to maybe use for maybe governmental purposes, regulatory purposes. But in the case of us, like we're trying to protect small to medium sized businesses. So leveraging those
100%.
testimonies are huge, and then I think the power of reporting is also essential as well. Like there's not really a perceived benefit half the time, and we could talk about quality of life. Having a convenient, there's a downstream quality of life benefit that you have by providing more modern security services and technology solutions. But being able to demonstrate in quarterly business reviews and deliverables, what have we actually done in the background, despite all you're seeing is a green light just steadily humming along? What have we actually thwarted and prevented and really done in the background that we can prove with data and things from our reporting console from our solution, for example? So I think, yeah, two things, right? The power of publicly available data from third party sources, veritable and reputable third party sources, but also are the solutions that we're using providing a comprehensive reporting and insight module that we can then use to build into QBRs, one pagers, deliverables, on demand reports, et cetera.
Gotcha. Now, with so there's like okay, sorry. My head is going a million different directions right now, Jesse. So I see in the comments, people saying, AV is all clients think they need. Other people think, VPN and AV is all they think they need. There's like a shift that many most whatever the right word is, MSPs are trying to do, where they're trying to go from like VPN to zero trust, right? So when let's just assume they've already determined, all right, we're not doing VPN anymore, we're doing some type of zero trust networking connection. um when you're working with that MSP partner, they need to try and figure out how to explain that to a client, right? Where does their explanation typically fall apart? Is it because they're getting too technical? Is it because they're not including data points or testimonials? Is it because they're not trying to like find an analogy? Like a lot of people will try to talk about cars or houses or, like whatever your client does, they might try and find an analogy that fits between MSP, the service you're trying to deliver, and like an analogy that fits within your customer's industry. AI is great for that, by the way. What are you seeing?
Yeah, well, I'm keeping track of the comments while we're speaking here, and Sean, who's actually been using Timus for quite some time now, so you can kind of take it from him as sort of an anecdotal, reference. Sean is 100% correct. Like, we need to think about having these conversations because, like, you have to remember, like, your end users aren't living and breathing this subject matter every day, right? We're talking about people that work in, law firms and financial services and dental clinics and things to that effect, retail industries. So what's obvious to us is actually not very obvious to end users. So we need to make sure that we're explaining these things in a way that's meeting them at their level. And having that in mind, we need to think very carefully. And this is exactly what I think Sean is mentioning. And Sean, you can maybe correct me if I'm wrong or I'm kind of misunderstanding this in the comment, but features versus benefits.
Hmm.
I see this a lot with our own sales team. Well, not to the effect that they're, ineffective in their sales methodologies and tactics, but I see this as just being a common mistake because the more that you know about something, the more you just kind of want to proselytize, why you have certain features and like what they principally do. Like, what is the functionality of these features, and just what is maybe that laundry list of features. And yeah, I mean, you and me and everybody in attendance here, we're actually very interested in the technology itself, right? I mean, otherwise we probably wouldn't be doing this. We're reading third-party literature about these things. We're always interested in what other vendors are doing, exploring other elements of the stack, right? We're multifunctional IT professionals, and we have to have a
Mhm.
general level of interest and facility with all the disparate elements of our stack. But the issue is that we can't just go to an end user, decision maker, executives, tell them a bunch of features that we have with this new service and solution and expect that to be compelling and resonate with them. It's really not an effective technique for positioning a new service. We have to understand what challenges might they be having, first of all, with whatever incumbent service we're providing that we want to update or lack thereof. Find the pain points with that and then map those specific pain points to obviously a feature that we have, but more importantly, the benefit of that feature that we're recommending.
Mhm.
Right. So Sean said something that's very true. If we just want to look at this through the prism of like VPNs. VPNs, of course, are notorious for, if you're thinking about this from the standpoint of an end user experience, they're notorious for, sluggish speeds, dropped connections. Therefore, a lot of people don't even want to log into these things. So there's a significant quality of life element for why we might want to position a more modern, let's say VPN service, like something like Timus or SASE more broadly, still has the fundamental trappings of VPNs. We're just layering in a bunch of other kind of security elements like, cloud firewalling, zero trust, et cetera, conditional access. But we can clearly tell them, like, look, you don't really need to know what L3, L7 cloud firewalls are and what, identity-based microsegmentation means and, DNS filtering and URL-based web filtering. Like those might be helpful to know to inform your sales approach to speak on benefits, but you could
Mhm.
principally say, hey, this is going to shrink your attack surface because users are only going to the things that they require. They don't need to remember to log in because they're always on, right? You don't want somebody going to Starbucks and hopping on a spoofed access point, having their bank information stolen, for example. I actually have a friend that's happened to, just to give you a personal anecdote. I was thinking the power of personal anecdotes is very helpful, other elements of storytelling. But ultimately, like Sean said, like your connection is going to be better, demonstrably higher performing, and you'll just be way more secure, potentially more compliant. We could actually get you a lower cyber insurance premium, for instance. So I think starting with just what are the tangible and easily understandable benefits of what we're providing versus like getting into the weeds of some pedantic like technical rant, which yeah is like great to know, but I think it's more important to know those things to either be mapping those to specific challenges and pain points. How are you making these people better, more secure, having a higher quality of life? And yeah, I think that's really what I've seen just being a more successful approach to these security conversations because end users aren't really that read in on this stuff. And I think it's important to be quite sensitive to that. So I think Sean is 100% correct, unless, I'm
So I like that. You guys are saying don't worry about the features. Don't try to think about an analogy that you can use to try and explain this in terms they can understand. Just focus on the benefits.
focus on the benefits. And I think, like I kind of said in passing, like also referencing real world examples.
Mhm.
So you could take something like the company I used to work, another cybersecurity company I used to work at before Timus. We had a client, and again, I'm just kind of using the VPN example, just since that's sort of what we're talking about right now. It's also just kind of what we end up replacing largely at Timus. A company I used to work at, we had a client that had a security incident through an insider threat because they were working remotely or in hybrid fashion, let's say, but they had users connecting to the digital estate remotely through a VPN. And when they were in the VPN, as some of you in the audience might know, VPNs are extraordinarily overprivileged. So you get through a single point of authentication, and then you're kind of implicitly trusted to just go wherever you want across the digital
Mhm.
estate, just principally based on what the VPN is connected to. And the end user was a disgruntled employee who was planning on leaving the company, but they noticed, being relatively tech savvy, even though they weren't working as like a systems admin, they noticed that they had access to the finance file server when they were connected to the
Yikes.
VPN, and they could actually access employee payroll data. And they ended up downloading and exfiltrating a bunch of that employee payroll data and exfiltrating it to nefarious sources on the dark web. So they had a huge security incident around this, but you literally could have prevented that just by saying, maybe I don't want somebody who's not in the, let's say on the finance team to have access to finance resources, right? If they're on the
Yeah.
development team, limit them to those resources. If you're on the sales team, so on and so forth. So, you could say like enforcing just more identity based access controls just makes logical sense without actually understanding how that might be afforded through cloud firewall rules, IPsec tunnel connectors and things to that effect. So just using real world examples and then citing, reputable third party literature, like I mentioned, from, let's just say like narrative agnostic, research firms and cyber insurance firms that I mentioned, to a certain extent.
Gotcha. All right. Now, I see, so we talked about all of the comments. Good. So, since we've found analogies aren't necessary and talking more about benefits is necessary, what would you say is the way we pivot? Like, for example, if you try and sell to an MSP might actually be more interested in the technology. They're less interested in the benefits, right? Like, sure, they're interested in the benefits, but they want to know all the ins and outs of how the features work, right?
I think to an extent, you know, when you're positioning a technology solution like this to MSPs, I think the approach is slightly different. But I would still actually urge like any salesperson positioning any piece of technology kit to an MSP to still focus on benefits over features. But
Well, I've got
also,
a
yeah, go
I've
ahead.
got a room filled with MSPs. What do you think? Like, do you guys want to hear the benefits, or do you want to hear the features, like the technology? Obviously, I'm sure it's probably a combination of both, because without understanding the benefits, you won't understand if it makes sense to move forward. But I don't know. As an IT guy, and maybe because I'm a little neurodivergent, I've always been interested in the features. I don't care what time it is. I want to know how the watch is made.
Yeah, well, you definitely can't have one without the other though, right? Because much like you can't, think about like just like space and time, right? You
Hmm.
can't say, "Hey, meet me on the corner," without specifying when to meet me on the corner, or vice versa. So one, they both kind of inform each other, and they have to be existing in tandem with one another. But I do think that benefits are actually downstream of features, which might sound a little counterintuitive because when we're trying to, solve problems for MSPs, like I don't think people should just buy Timus or other pieces of kit just because they want to. I think we need to represent like what meaningful change are we about to embark on that takes us from where we are right now and like where we would actually prefer to be. So like what is the actual gap in getting there? And I think the same applies for the clients that we're positioning the services to. Like I mentioned, I provide direct sales overlay for our partners. So I see this all the
Hmm.
time. And, what MSPs tell me, like our partners in particular, tell me they feel they're struggling with when positioning Timus to their clients. And I see it in real time on the calls when they kind of tap me in to maybe come in from the vendor perspective. And by the way, one thing I want to mention is I don't want to diminish the value of analogies. And analogies are still extremely useful, particularly when you're thinking about people that just need maybe a more helpful illustration, maybe to get something visual in their head of like how exactly like are these benefits tied to certain features? Like, what is maybe another way to explain this? And like, you can even think of Temis, and just from the standpoint of Temis being like, look, think of it like TSA, right? You don't just get onto your plane and get to your destination because you have the ticket and, right? Just because you bought a ticket doesn't give you the right to get on a plane. You have to show that you are like it's almost zero trust at the airport, right? They're constantly verifying you, never trusting. Um, they have to check your identity, your passport, your luggage. You go through a metal detector. If you're flying internationally, I just came back from Turkey recently. I had to go through two other checkpoints after the initial security checkpoint, just to make sure that I actually should be on the plane and that all my stuff was secure. Like right before I got on the plane, I had to go through yet another checkpoint where I had to take everything out of my bag. They had to scrub everything. They had to go. I mean, it might differ according to the country, of course, but my point is you can use analogies like that are easy to understand and paint a pretty clear, like thematic picture of like what are we actually trying to accomplish here versus maybe something from the status quo, which is in the case of VPNs, like, hey, you have a password, you have an MFA, like, yeah, you're welcome in the network. You can stay in the network and you can go wherever you want as long as we're connected to it. Like, I think analogies are still very helpful, and hopefully, I didn't maybe diminish the
Sure.
value of them when
No, no,
communicating.
no. You're good. Analogies are dead to me. No.
Yeah, for sure. Sorry
All
about
right.
that.
No, no, no. No, I've got jokes, guys. All right. So, we've established that the client, they need to see what they're getting, right? So, let's take continuous verification. What does a client actually gain when they say yes to it? What changes in their business the day after they start being protected?
Well, in the standpoint of Timus, if we're talking about like never like really adopting like a zero trust like attitude and philosophy, like what does that actually mean from like a security standpoint? Well, in the case of Timus, if you're thinking about continuous verification, that means in particular in our case, you're looking at three different access levels of a user's session or potential session within our network. That's when they're being signed in into their agent, when they're having their connection established to our tunnel, and then what's actually happening in the middle of their session. So we're looking at these three different levels of a user session and implementing zero trust gates based on different attributes that we want people to clear at each of those three levels.
Mm,
So, for example, if somebody in the case of Timus, if somebody is trying to sign into their agent or connect to the tunnel from a device that we never actually put the agent on in the first place, well, yeah, at the very least, I might not want to let that person authenticate into the network. That's a clear sign that a threat actor is involved, right? That's not the actual company managed device that we deployed the agent to. Maybe somebody's trying to sign in or connect and they're coming outside of a specified geofenced radius that we set for them. Maybe they haven't, logged in a few days. I want them to authenticate against their MFA again. Maybe they're showing signs of impossible travel. Maybe their antivirus isn't running, right? Talking about that layered approach, for instance. Their antivirus isn't seen to be running on their machine. Like that needs to be running in order for you to authenticate into the network. I mean, just period the end. Same if you want your data EDR hunt agent to be seen as running. You want to make sure your disk is encrypted. You want to make sure CrowdStrike.exe is running, etc. But also, you want to think about these things from the standpoint of in the middle of their session. Just because you are authenticating the network based on the initial sign in and connection to the tunnel, that doesn't mean I'm suddenly disinterested in verifying these attributes on a continuous basis, like you said, Steve.
mhm,
So, what happens if somebody is in the middle of their session and now we're seeing that the antivirus isn't running? Now we're seeing that the disk isn't encrypted. Now we're seeing other forms of attributes that make me think twice about wait, this person maybe shouldn't be in the network anymore. Maybe we should remove them through an automation. Maybe we should force them to authenticate against their MFA again, etc. Because again, like you might see threat actors who get onto a certain device and they start disabling all the requisite security software that you need to be running on that device. And Timus is saying, look, I want to make sure that we can constantly assess these people against a robust posture check and a variety of different zero trust attributes to ensure that they are who they say they are in the device that they're coming from. Otherwise, you just be back to the old VPN problem, which is you have a single point of authentication, and then as long as you have the password and MFA, what other conditional access are we actually enforcing to make sure that they get in initially? But what about having some control and automation around ensuring that they are at that appropriate level of posture to stay in the network? And that's exactly what we mean by continuous verification. And like I think being able to show this in the form of reports, like I said earlier, is really key because you can go to business owners once, twice, monthly, per week, etc., and show, hey, here's how many, suspicious or outright overtly malicious zero trust gates that were failed by such and such users on such and such devices on these dates. Imagine painting the picture of what would have happened in the absence of these things. You would have had people in the network that actually shouldn't have been there. Maybe for with respect to compliance, to regulatory frameworks, to a certification that you're trying to pursue or uphold, or with respect to your cyber insurance premiums, as I mentioned. So I think the power of reporting in conjunction with how these things are implemented is key because again, I just want to emphasize like the trope of the only perceptive value people might be getting, maybe alongside like, hey, connection speeds are better. I don't need to log in because it's an always on connection. Other than that, they're not really going to see that this is making them more secure in real time. Maybe other than they have to do it, an MFA if they haven't logged in for a few days, which is something that people are already familiar with. Otherwise, this is kind of esoteric and arcane, and the power of reporting is really essential to prove and demonstrate what we're doing, other than us just telling them, because it's like source, trust me, bro. Right? That's not probably going to be sufficient in a lot of cases.
all right. So, What I'd like to do is, I see we've got a question in the chat, Jesse, that says, "How should we connect security to the company budget and employees when talking to the CEOs?" Now, we're going to answer that in a few minutes. And I want to answer other questions. So, guys, if you have questions, how do I sell? How do I convince? How do I justify? Whatever. Cybersecurity services and solutions to our clients, whether it's a particular end user at a client, a particular um, uh, personality type, or maybe you have found there's a certain vertical industry that they never want to open up the purse strings. Like, put it in the chat. Let's get it all out there. Let's answer that. And we're going to do that in a few minutes. Jesse, I know we've kind of danced around what Timus does. What we're going to do, guys, is we're going to take like 5 minutes, okay? And we're going to talk about what Timus does, and we're also going to talk about what alternative payments does. And then we're going to go right back into content education, okay? So, Jesse, can you walk us through what exactly is Timus? What does it do? Why does it do it?
Yeah. Timus, we help MSPs replace their VPNs with always on secure cloud access predicated on the principles of zero trust for themselves and their small to medium sized business clients. And this comes in the form of kind of like we've been dancing around a single agent that is set to be always on. So end users don't need to remember to log in and disconnect and reconnect when they're on a company managed device and be subjected to identity based microsegmentation across the network, right? Like we already said with VPNs, they're extraordinarily overprivileged. Just because you're in a VPN doesn't mean you should access whatever it's connected to. So enforcing least privileged access with our cloud firewall that exists within the tunnel at our gateway level is key for saying, I only want certain people going to certain resources because that's within the scope of their role. This applies to your SaaS applications. This applies to web based resources and web apps, as well as cloud and on prem infrastructure. Now, a couple of the other trappings, I think we already talked a lot about the zero trust philosophy and attributes and features that undergird a lot of the architecture. But if we're also thinking about minimizing your attack surface with this, it also comes in the form of using a static public IP address that is assigned to all of the devices that authenticate into any given tunnel. And that is key because now we can use a single static public IP to whitelist access to our SaaS applications like 365, like IT Glue, et cetera. I think it's just as useful internally for MSPs as it is for their clients who are using SaaS applications. Can use the cloud firewall to afford URL-based web filtering. You obviously shouldn't go to known malicious websites, firearms, gambling, adult film, et cetera, on a company managed device. And to the extent that people still need to remotely access resources that we have in our cloud infrastructure in Azure, GCP, AWS, things that are behind a firewall on-prem, they'll still be able to securely connect to those from our tunnel with respect to identity-based segmentation rules using IPsec tunnel connectors that can be built to anything that accepts an IPsec. And really the idea is to create an always-on virtual office perimeter subjected to all these zero trust principles, features, and network segmentation in a way that is easier, multi-tenanted solution architecture built for MSPs. And I think, like Sean was saying earlier, a way that actually affords higher speeds, better reliability, better uptime, and zero end user interaction. They go into an office, okay, it automatically turns off. They leave the office, boom, it automatically turns back on. They reboot their machine, they're automatically authenticated against their identity provider, etc. So really just replacing VPNs exclusively for MSPs and their small to medium sized business clients.
That's awesome. Thank you for that. I'm going to change it up. I've still got my slide deck here, but let's talk about some features and benefits today. All right, guys. So, alternative payments. We are an accounts receivable automation platform. We give you a client portal for your customers to pay you. So, feature automated collection emails sent from your own domain. The benefit clients see your brand on every payment touch point, not a third party vendor, right? We like where this is going, I hope. So, feature one flat monthly fee, no surprise per transaction fees, no confusing. statements at the end of the month, benefit. You know exactly what you're paying before the month starts. All right. White labeled portal with your logo and colors gives you the benefit that your clients pay inside your brand, not someone else's checkout page. And then we've also got the features of ACH, credit card. You can even do buy now, pay later for your clients and offer auto pay all in one place. The benefit is your clients can pick how they pay, and the ones who set up auto pay stop being a collections task. We uh we have some features like two-way sync with PSAs and accounting platforms, and we're even starting to integrate with quoting solutions. We integrate with Datagate. So, what does that mean? The invoice gets created in your PSA or in your accounting platform, and we collect it and we start working with it. There's no manual steps in between. We also another benefit there is we're going to automate the entire accounts receivable process. So, marking invoices paid, creating the deposit, making it so all you have to do is match things when you download your bank feed and then reconcile at the end of the month. Finally, we have a REST API. If you want to build your own custom automations, if your stack doesn't fit a pre-built integration, you can build the connection yourself and own the entire workflow. Uh, and then the last couple things to go over is credit card fees can be passed through to your clients. So if you're sick of, eating 3% every month on average of potential margin, stop it. And we give you that flexibility, and we also give you the flexibility to pick and choose which clients, why, etc. Uh, Finally, we have no fees on ACH payments. So your lowest friction payment method is also your cheapest one to accept. So, look, guys, I'm going to launch a poll for alternative payments. I should have launched one for Timus. I'm going to do that after this one. If you guys are interested in learning more about alternative payments, how we can improve your company's cash flow, and get you from like 35 plus days sales outstanding down to like 8 days sales outstanding. So you start using today's money today instead of tomorrow. Uh, I popped up a poll. Just let us know because a conversation couldn't hurt, right? All right. So, like I said, I will launch a poll here for Timus shortly. Um, eBay, we can answer questions about our platforms at the end. Uh, I want to stick to the sales and cybersecurity stuff. No offense. All right. So, Jesse, how do we connect security to the company budget and employees when talking to CEOs? Let's break this one apart. So we need to look at this from a couple different ways, right? Because you've got a budget for IT, usually at companies, and then you've got a budget maybe for each employee or like just an expected cost per employee. So, how do we connect all of this when talking to CFOs, CEOs, so that way it makes sense for them?
Yeah. Well, of course, when you're running into budgetary constraints, obviously, I mean, as the verbiage suggests, right? There are going to be some genuine constraints that you have to try to work around and navigate. Sometimes it really
Mhm.
does result in having to punt the initiative when there's real budget that can be allocated to this stuff. One of the things I've seen be very successful in that regard is oftentimes, I wouldn't say this is universally true, of course, but oftentimes many organizations are withholding or have in reserve a non-trivial amount of discretionary budget. So budget that I actually have set aside that could be applied to, it's basically earmarked for whatever they think is useful in a sort of circumstance like this. So understanding if they have and how much discretionary budget can actually open up feasibility of this project versus punting it down the line for now. Something else I've seen with respect to Timus, of course, and I think this applies for other elements of your stack, is that naturally what we see And I think a lot of people have experience with this in the audience here, but naturally, what we see these days is many of the tools that are offered for MSPs can conveniently consolidate functionality from historically what required two or three or four different tools. So, in the case of Timus, for example, if we're able to consolidate things like maybe our firewall and maybe our DNS filtering, Cisco umbrella type of solution, well, then we could actually probably save costs and pass those down to our clients as a competitive advantage, make this more appealing for them from a budget standpoint, or I mean, even just kind of as a sidebar, we could retain that as an additional margin for ourselves. And the reason I say for firewalls in particular with Timus is because, in large part, just think about the thematic undertones of the subject matter. People aren't at an office as much, where we've usually had a robust firewall sitting at the edge, and the data isn't at the office as much, and a server room sitting behind a firewall. So, as a function of that, people just working in a more distributed fashion, we're not protecting as much at the edge. So, do we need like a $20,000 firewall sitting at the edge? Well, no, maybe actually not in a lot of ways. So, the conversation can then become not just about discretionary budget, but what are the actual cost savings that we can afford by positioning the service and say, well, hey, you actually might not be paying as much potentially because we can downgrade to a less robust firewall while also positioning the service to you, which includes a cloud firewall. Like, obviously, still want to have something at the edge, but this ties directly into what I'm saying in terms of passing those cost savings right down to your client and making this just more appealing for them. And I
So,
also think you could move the needle more quickly by understanding what industry they're in. Of course, obviously, you guys understand the industries that your clients are operating in, but with
mhm.
respect to the shifting sands of certifications, compliance frameworks, these things are obviously constantly evolving. And what I've seen a lot, for things like, people working in financial services and healthcare, I mean, retail, all these types of things, to any extent that people are working and operating in their corporate network in a remote, hybrid, or distributed fashion, a lot of these frameworks and certifications are now requiring, among other things, something as simple as always on secure cloud access. So if you're using a VPN, you simply can't do that. And who knows what types of fines we might be incurring or how we're going to be penalized if we're not staying compliant with that and adopting these types of solutions. So obviously, you want to make a bulwark, against those possibilities. And then ultimately, like, what's maybe the opportunity cost of the status quo? What are maybe some of the hidden costs in the form of billable hours, downtime that people are experiencing? Like, I hear it from clients all the time using VPNs, just since that's what I principally operate in with Timus. You'll hear all the time from clients of MSPs that they'll log in to work in the morning. They have to submit a deadline for something for a project or whatever they're working on, and they have an email from their admin saying, "Hey, schedule downtime for the next 4 hours because we have to repair a tunnel or patch a CVE or something like that."
Mhm.
Those are obviously you could maybe quantify those, but it's also just a qualitative cost. Like, those are billable hours, and I think exploring some of these areas is a key way to not just uncover things like the discretionary budget, but what are some of the ways we can actually save you money and maybe not need to tap into reserves, or what money actually exists, especially if we're positioning this in maybe a bundled cost with a slight uplift, or just want to sell it as a standalone, per user cost in ways that can actually help to identify, yeah, we do have budget for this. So just kind of spitballing some of the ways that I've seen this kind of objection be navigated just working with our partners. And also just other enterprise experience just in my career.
Hmm. So I'm going to go ahead and launch a poll. If look, Jesse is obviously a wealth of knowledge. So if you want to have a conversation with him and see how the team at Timus can help your MSP, help your clients, I guess I should say, um, please take a moment, answer that poll. Now, I just want to clarify Timus is like endpoint only security. You can't do like site to site with Timus, right?
Yes, you can. It is agent based. So
Okay.
compare that to like an internet facing login panel that you'd authenticate in or through for your VPN. Everything would start with a Timus Connect agent, just a lightweight software agent that goes onto the endpoint. Traffic is then routed to our cloud hosted gateways. And then from those gateways, you can set up connectors that go to your on prem environment, things to the internet, SaaS apps, cloud infrastructure. So you would be setting up site to site like IPsec tunnels in that regard from the gateway. But everything would originate from the agent on the local machine.
Okay. Um, let's talk about. So we've talked about VPN moving to zero trust. We've talked about continuous verification. Um, does this your platform doesn't do anything for like local security on the device, does it?
With respect to what exactly?
So you would not replace EDR, MDR, XDR, that type of thing. You're just more like from the device, making sure that it's got a safe, secure tunnel into the destination, and then it's might be checking things on the device to verify things are still running correctly, so that way it keeps the tunnel up, but you still need whatever your other security solutions are. This isn't an all-in-one platform.
Yes, exactly. This goes right back to what I mentioned in the very beginning, which is, really emphasizing the importance. And look, I know this is very obvious to an audience like this, but really just emphasizing the importance of a layered approach to security. There's
Yeah.
no silver bullet, but you want to minimize your attack surface as much as possible while also making life easier for end users and administrators alike. So yeah, we're not trying to replace EDRs and endpoint protection platforms. We work in conjunction with them to ensure that if those things aren't even running, just among other things, those things aren't even running, your antivirus,
Mhm.
your EDR, etc. Should you actually be in the corporate network? No, absolutely not. Why should I let you access mission critical resources if we don't even have the basic security features that need to be running on the machine um, be seen as running? That doesn't make any logical sense. And obviously, if you're trying to explain that to an auditor or a third party insurer, et cetera, it's not going to make much sense to them either. So yeah, it's really important to work in conjunction with these things. And we have native integrations with a bunch of different protection platforms, et cetera. I could go on maybe in a separate dialogue if anybody wants to connect with me after. But yeah, we're designed to integrate and work with other elements of your stack.
Okay. What questions do we have from the crowd? Um, so e- e- eBay was asking about uh, accessing like small camera security platforms. So I don't know that this would do camera to camera because you have to install an agent, and you can't install an agent on, I don't know, if we'll say most cameras. But you could install it on the computer, so that way it can securely connect into the network to see the cameras.
Yeah, without getting too technical and eBay, sorry, I'm not sure what your first name is. Looks like Sean is kind of elaborating on this too. Yeah, you could set up like an agent relay connection to get to like a particular device, IoT printers, etc. By having Timus route to a specific, let's say device machine that we have the agent on, have it routed through a specific network interface, and then getting to the target, IP destination, like a camera, IoT printers, etc. So you can certainly accomplish that with Timus. Thank you, by the way, Sean. It's good to have a partner in here who obviously has some prowess and facility with the solution.
Yes, it is. Uh, and then I'm going to answer a question that was asked earlier. Um, so when I said you can pass the fee. So in regards to alternative payments, I said you can save money on the credit card fees. So it's because you have the option with our platform to pass the fee to the client. So, if they're paying with an American Express, maybe that's like 3.5%. They're paying with a Visa, MasterCard, Discover, let's call it 2.9%. Um, it just gets passed to the customer, and then you don't pay it. So that's all I meant. It's not because it's, card types, or if the card is present versus remote. Um, yeah. So hopefully that answers your question there. Jesse, is Timus overkill for the camera thing?
I mean, maybe with respect to that in isolation, I mean, maybe counterintuitively, yeah, you probably want to do some more stuff with it because it's built to, protect your entire corporate network and digital estate. But in that specific use case, yeah, Timus would work just fine. I mean, Steve, I'm not sure if people are sending out my email address or something like that if they want to connect with me after. But I can certainly elaborate on that use case if you want to connect or just have a dialogue over email. But yeah, it would certainly work if that's what you're trying to accomplish. Hopefully,
Okay,
among other things.
sounds good. Now, let's say I want to sell some cybersecurity services to a dentist. Everyone I always hear complain about dentists. So, what is why? Do you hear problems about dentists, Jesse?
Um, well, I think dentists, I would be very surprised if they're as literate in IT and security as we are. I mean, I'm sure they're reading, reports from the American
He's
Dental
choosing
Society.
his words real wisely, guys.
um, yeah, well, I think, dentists and, maybe other sort of medical professions, lawyers. I'm not expecting these people to really understand, technology the way that we do. But I think, yeah, I mean, what Sean is saying is 100% correct. Like, maybe because of that, they're not as sensitive to what is actually going on with HIPAA with respect to IT related things. Obviously,
Yeah.
they have to have some, sort of tangential awareness of what HIPAA is and maybe what some of the kind of dynamic requirements are with it. But part of what like MSPs do, and again, guys, I know this is like totally stating the obvious, talking to a room full of MSPs, but we have to understand that MSPs are more than just like providing service delivery with our technology. It's also providing consulting on these like other sort of peripheral things, like compliance, like certifications that they should be pursuing. I know I've said that a few times now, but it's also our job to make sure they understand what the latest developments are with respect to these different compliance frameworks and ensuring that they can stay compliant. Like you don't want to and by the way, I think that actually helps you score a lot more points from a credibility perspective to then position other services. It's like, hey, Sean and eBay, like they actually know what they're talking about. These are my trusted advisors. And next time that they're positioning a service to me, I can actually be confident that this is coming from an informed perspective, not just somebody that wants to sell me another service, another line item. Like it's really important to build credibility. And that comes in the form of bringing value to your clients. Like I was just doing a training for our business development representatives the other day, and one thing I was really hammering home with them is, look, you're cold calling people among other forms of outreach, cold calling people that have never spoken to you, have no idea who you are, have no idea if you're credible. For obviously, you're going to be a little, suspicious on like, should I actually put stock in what this person's saying? So the key in those types of engagements and just partner relations in general is to how do you actually bring value outside of overtly sales forward discussions and dialogues? And that comes in the form of saying, hey, did you know that this is happening with HIPAA? Hey, I wanted to send you this report that I read today because it said this, that, and that. Like, what do you think? Do you want to talk about it? Bringing value apart from just sales forward things is a crucial way to bring credibility to your services and to actually improve client relations so they're more receptive to the services you're positioning. And look, I think it's just going to make everybody better, right? If your clients are happy, you're happy, then you're being able to sell them more things. I mean, I think it's fairly self-explanatory, but yeah, bringing value apart from sales discussions is crucial. So consulting is a huge part of what MSPs do, of course.
Yeah. So, um, I see eBay is asking about PCI DSS compliance. I know that it requires you to like control and verify who can access cardholder data, right? Um, so I guess so he's asking how would we sell to the CEO PCI compliance and zero trust? Or is there a way to package it? I think that zero trust helps you control and verify who accesses cardholder data if the data is local. If they have a device or, like a really secure Excel spreadsheet on the local network with all of that cardholder data, then uh, this would enable somebody from outside the building to access that data securely. Zero Trust does exactly that. However, uh, I don't know, the likelihood that all of that data is just sitting on the local network and not at the payment provider's cloud somewhere these days. I don't know. What, Jesse? Do you have thoughts here?
Yeah, well, this is part of the problem with the old paradigm, which is, of course, being kind of phased out now. I mean, that's why we're having this conversation. But
Yeah.
sometimes you can really prove your point in your sales approach by just talking about what the alternative or the incumbent status quo is. So, like, take for example, people accessing healthcare data or PCI data, things like that.
Uh-huh.
Largely, if you're using like a VPN, by dint of having the password and MFA token, because the VPN is connected to those things, they're implicitly trusting and explicitly granting you access to those things. And that's obviously not compliant anymore for a lot of these different frameworks because that's saying if a threat actor, like, think about what the most common form of cyber attack is it's phishing, stolen credentials, hijacked MFA tokens. If the only point of entry into that corporate network is through a VPN on an internet facing login panel with the right password and with the right MFA token, there's no other form of zero trust or conditional access in the manner of like a layered approach that's controlling that pathway to those resources. So that's like saying, look, somebody in Romania has your stolen credentials and MFA token. Now that means they have a linear pathway to get to a certain SaaS app, to get to a certain file share, to get to literally anything that VPN is connected to. And that's why these regulatory agencies have begun mandating these things. Search doesn't help with cloud EMR server hosted. Well, I think it would help in the respect that we're securing the connection to those things behind a comprehensive conditional access and least privileged access policy, right? Only the people that are, let's say, members of the teams that should have rightful access to those things are the ones we're explicitly granting access for, and they're not going to actually be able to get there, even if they are within those respective umbrellas and categories, classifications, unless they're passing robust and comprehensive conditional access and zero trust policies that we're setting forth as part of the service architecture, right? Are you coming from a device that we put the agent on? Great. Are you? Is your operating system up to date? Is the security software on your machine running? Are you coming from the static IP that we've maybe whitelisted access through IP access controls in that resource destination, etc.? These are things that I think zero trust solutions like Timus actually do help with when people are accessing, cloud EMR software and other forms of, PCI, all those things.
And and I think it's important to say, does Timus also do like the equivalent of what's it called? SD-WAN?
Yeah, like a software defined WAN. I wouldn't
Yeah,
say we are overtly, we're not really marketing ourselves as SD-WAN. I think that is
sure.
a relatively different category of solution, but still has a lot of the trapping of creating like a software defined perimeter, right?
So
When I say virtual office perimeter, I think that's very consonant with a software defined perimeter. Absolutely, right? Because you're not in the office now. The outside the office is the new virtual office that we're creating, in a sense.
right. So so earlier you mentioned how you could go to a Starbucks and you want to make sure that you're always safe and secure, right? So Timus isn't a VPN, it's like a zero trust network firewall thing. I'm sure you can say it much more elegantly. I apologize. But bottom line is whether I'm connecting to like an office or not, I could still use Timus, Sassy as a platform. If we're just looking for like, you know what, I don't want to just use what is it, Proton VPN when I'm outside of the country. I want to use something more secure. I'm gonna sign up with Timus. That way, no matter where I am, doesn't matter what airport, what coffee shop, what hotel, nobody can see the traffic that I'm transmitting on the internet because it's all encrypted inside the Timus network platform. Is that a way to look at this?
Yeah, like I've said a few times, this still does have and carry over the basic trappings of virtual private networks, particularly in the form of like secure tunneling encrypted connections.
Mhm.
At a very basic level, you can actually just use Timus as a better, faster, more reliable cloud delivered uh, VPN. You could at a very fundamental level. But Timus is built to do much more than that. It's built to handle securing your corporate network, minimizing your attack surface, affording conditional access, all the things that we've kind of been talking about, on top of just still having the basics of secure tunneling. Like when I'm on the road, for example, because I use Timus on my device, obviously, I'm paranoid about these things, to be quite honest. given that I'm living and breathing this stuff every day. When I'm not in my house, or even when I'm in my house sometimes, or when I'm on the road at conferences and hotels and I'm at libraries and airports, you better believe for no other reason, for just for specifically for the purpose of encrypted connections, I am making sure Timus is on. I'm turning it on. There's no
Mhm.
reason for me to be using public Wi-Fi without having Timus turned on because it's still at a very basic level, like I've said, it's still providing a secure encrypted tunnel, secure encrypted connection. And obviously, I'm on public connections maybe more frequently than I like to admit because I'm on the road a lot. So yeah, I don't want people seeing what I'm doing in plain text, and God forbid, I don't want to be on a spoofed access point.
Same. All right. I believe we have been able to answer everybody's questions. If not, I know Alternative Payments tomorrow will send out a follow up email to everyone who registered with the recording to this. So please do not hesitate to respond to that. I bet Timus will probably do the same. I am also going to put my email address here in the chat. Jesse may decide to do that if he is so daring.
Yeah, I think
Um,
it's not letting me, Steve. But it's
oh,
just first dot last name Jesse dot Moldovan at timusnetworks.com. So please reach out to me if you just want to chat some more
there you
about
go.
this. eBay, I know you wanted to do that, so just shoot me a message. We can set up a time to talk some more. But yeah, Steve, thanks for bringing me on. Like I said, thank you for the honor of the invitation. It was a pleasure to share sort of what I've seen from our partner base and kind of interactions with their clients, on the topic of zero trust and just how to position security services at large.
100%, man. I really appreciate you coming on. I appreciate all of you for sticking around. You all have a great rest of your day. Take care, guys.
Awesome. Cool. Thank you, everyone.